Misdemeanor.
I'm minding my business, officer.
Two officers move in and try to physically arrest him. Garner seems to resist. Within seconds, the 350-pound man is down. From the ground, Garner cries out.
Put your hand behind your back. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Within 90 seconds of making the stop, the 29-year-old officer fired 7 shots. Castile's girlfriend, Diamond Reynolds, was in the passenger seat. She streamed the immediate aftermath on Facebook Live.
I told him not to reach for it. I told him to get out.
When you pull away from me, you're resisting arrest.
This make you feel real good, don't it? A female for a traffic signal. For a traffic signal. I know that make you feel good, officer.
Take care of yourself.
I know it make you feel real good. You're a real man now. You just slam me, knock my head in the ground. I got epilepsy, you mother.
Good.
Good.
You should have thought about that before you start resisting.
All right, yeah, this is real good. Real good for a female, yeah.
Slavery.
Slavery started in 1619 and ended in 1865. Moffat referred to slavery as great destruction and terrible occurrence. He also referred to slavery as Black Holocaust because millions of slaves died during the Middle Passage. The Middle Passage was a terrible, terrible journey for a lot of African Americans. Throughout that journey, a lot of blacks tried to commit suicide, but the captives, they didn't want them to because obviously they would be useful for labor work and whatever else they wanted them to do in the slavery condition process. Also, the parents on the ship who had babies killed their child or children because they did not want them to go through the process of being a slave. As an example, for a girl, obviously they're going to be molested, forced to do housework, forced to be with a white man at a young age, forced to give themselves up, and they had no choice. No mother wants to see their child go through something like that. They would rather have chosen death over being captive like that.
Like the white colonizers, when they were taking the Africans from their homeland and taking them to the ships and stuff like that, when they took them to like places like America, they would give them new names, like your name's not this anymore. Also, like they'll just give them a whole new life, like basically breaking up families, putting them with other people, and then in a way like they would have to make a new family since they're with all these new strangers and other Africans just like them. They have to like form a new family
Within the institution.
Did you really think a nigger could accuse me, a white man, of anything at all?
Enslavement is fundamentally the history of commodifying human beings. That's what it is. It's about saying that your value can be reduced to a price. It's important for us to remember that enslaved people lived their lives in families because it reminds us of the ways that they were opposing their commodification. Historians and scholars use the term fictive kin, the creation of family ties in order to replace the family ties that have been so brutally wrenched from you. And I think that those are really the foundation for what we come to know about Afro-American cultural and historical life under slavery.
Your ornery Mandinka ways, they done started to rub off on me.
I don't think we can really know what it meant to live under the constant fear that you might be sold away from your family. Slavery imposed a very particular experience of trauma. Sometimes it reached right into your cabin and wrenched you out of it.
It was very drastic for the Africans. Like, just imagine like yourself like with your family, and then all of a sudden these random people come and take you and your family and put you with all these other families, and then break everybody up and send them to all types of different places. Like that's very heartbreaking. And basically they would do what was called seasoning and basically just tell them you can't do this anymore. You're like basically take their culture away from them and teach them a whole new culture like Christianity and all types of stuff. Like, it was just basically very sad and depressing, and it's just not a life to live.
Segregation.
In 1865, the 13th Amendment was created to abolish slavery. But during this time, they created black codes, which was sort of like a thing that dismantled the political and civil rights for African Americans and made it harder for them to live in society. Also, a couple of years later, not too much, the Jim Crow laws was created. They were originated from black codes, and during this time, they were the main core for the segregation in the United States.
You can never whip these boys if you don't keep you and them separate. I found that out in Birmingham. You've got to keep the white and the black separate.
Segregation in the United States was very strong. Black kids went to black schools, white kids went to white schools. Blacks found it harder to get jobs because they didn't want to hire them. Typically, during these days, blacks were known as the first fired, last hired, which meant, like, for whatever, any reason possible, if a black did something wrong, they'll be fired from a job just because they were black. They were last hired because, like, say if a white man who came in to get the job came before the black man, he would get the job first. Black folks were really typically oppressed during the time of segregation. They were treated as not humans. They even had a thing called redlining, which was discriminatory practices that kept them from getting loans in the banks, kept them from getting mortgages on houses, put them in typically a certain society. So, like, what we know as the ghetto is what they would try to place all blacks in. It was wealthy blacks back in the day, during that time, that could actually afford to get a house in a suburb neighborhood, but that would make them go to a poverty-filled neighborhood with other blacks to just because they were black. Segregation was really strong, and when segregation was getting ready to be changed, things got a little hectic.
Civil rights movement.
Emmett Till was a 14-year-old child who went to go visit his family in Mississippi. He went to the store with his cousin and was accused of harassing a woman named Carolyn Bryant. She accused him of whistling at her, and he was brutally beaten by her husband, Roy, and her brother, J.W. The men were tried for murder, but an all-white male jury acquitted them of all wrongdoings. This act of menace sparked the civil rights movement.
The civil rights movement itself was a mass popular movement to secure African Americans equal access to opportunities for the basic privileges and rights of U.S. citizens. The main face of the civil rights movement was Martin Luther King Jr. He was a preacher who later became a black activist for the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King's key concept was nonviolence. He believed that the way black people could get over oppression was to resist at a national level and participate in civil disobedience, which challenged all the segregation laws. King was ridiculed, threatened, and also thrown in jail for fighting for the rights of African Americans. Not only did MLK act to gain rights, but there were many others, such as Rosa Parks and Malcolm X.
Freedom is like religion to us.
Oppression and Black Panthers.
If my manager insults me again, I will be assaulting him. After I fuck the manager up, then I'm gonna shorten the register up. Let's go back to the Gap. Look at my check, wasn't no scratch. So if I stole, wasn't my fault. Yeah, I stole.
Oppression by institution or systematic oppression is when the laws of a place create unequal treatment of a specific social identity group or groups. Here are just a few examples of systematic oppression. This footage was taken on Memorial Drive in DeKalb County of the typical establishments offered where the population is predominantly African American. If you notice, there are plenty of package stores, check cashing places, fried chicken restaurants that are stereotypically targeting the black dollar. Publix supermarkets announced that it will close its Decatur store, and it comes as Stone Mountain shoppers are still reeling from the unexpected closure of the Kroger in the same community just a month prior. The recent moves are raising alarms among customers, community leaders, and county officials who are now hoping to prevent an exodus of name-brand shopping chains from the area. When the Civil War ended in 1865, African Americans in Atlanta began entering the realm of politics, establishing businesses, and gaining notoriety as a social class. Ill feelings were further worsened when blacks gained more civil rights. In the late 1950s, Atlanta embarked on its first attempt at urban renewal, which for many people at the time translated to Negro removal. Hundreds of homes were demolished by the city, and thousands of black families were separated from each other when 3 interstates were constructed through the heart of their communities. Redlining is an unethical practice that puts services, financial and otherwise, out of reach for residents of certain areas based on race or ethnicity. It can be seen in the systematic denial of mortgages, insurance, loans, and other financial services based on location and that area's default history, rather than an individual's qualifications and creditworthiness. Notably, the policy of redlining is felt the most by residents of minority neighborhoods. The term redlining was coined by sociologist James McKnight in the 1960s based on how lenders would literally draw a red line on a map around the neighborhoods they would not invest in based on demographics alone. Black inner-city neighborhoods were most likely to be redlined. Between 1984 and 1989, the homicide rate for black males aged 14 to 17 more than doubled, and the homicide rate for black males aged 18 to 24 increased nearly as much. During this period, the black community also experienced a 20 to 100% increase in fetal death rates, low birth weight babies, weapons arrests, and the number of children in foster care. In 1996, approximately 60% of inmates incarcerated in the U.S. were sentenced on drug charges.
This little dot has massive implications. This little dot in the middle of South Central LA affected the course of the nation. This was one of the first arrests of a crack user in 1981. So what does this dot have to do with you? A lot more than you might think. As early as 1981, reports of the alleged crack epidemic began surfacing in Los Angeles. Crack rock was cheaper, purer, and easier to get than traditional cocaine, and it took lower-income areas by storm. By 1983, the epidemic had taken hold of the city, turning communities into war zones. And soon, crack became a national crisis.
Today, there's a new epidemic. Smokable cocaine, otherwise known as crack. It is an uncontrolled fire.
Reagan's Anti-Drug Abuse Act imposed harsher sentences on crack than traditional cocaine use, leading to a decades-long debate that the law was unfairly targeting minorities and lower-income neighborhoods who couldn't afford the more expensive cocaine powder. Incarcerations in LA skyrocketed. By 1995, the California Department of Corrections increased its black and Latino inmates from 21,476 to 88,376, more than a 400% increase. This led to broken families, an overblown foster care system, increased violence, and a growing skid row that crippled the nation.
Now the story that might never have surfaced if someone hadn't picked up his home video camera. We've all seen the pictures of Los Angeles police officers beating a man they had just pulled over. The city's police chief said today he will support criminal charges against some of the men. Here's ABC's Gary Shepard.
The 3 police officers facing felony criminal charges were among a group of 15 who stopped a 25-year-old black man last Saturday night, then beat him, kicked him, and clubbed him, unaware that an amateur photographer was recording the incident on videotape. Los Angeles Police Chief Daryl Gates looked at the tape and said he thinks assault with a deadly weapon will be one of the charges.
In our review, we find that the officers struck him with batons between 53 and 56 times. One officer rendered 6 kicks and one officer 1 kick.
Civil rights organizations say the Los Angeles Police Department has a history of brutality and misconduct that goes back a quarter of a century, including one incident that sparked the Watts riots. So far this year, there have been more than 125 complaints of police misconduct filed with watchdog organizations.
We no longer want to have to wake up each morning not knowing what fear to expect next. Today, we are not sure that the police is there to protect us.
But Chief Gates today called the LAPD a model department and said he has no plans to resign. Gary Shepard, ABC News, Los Angeles.
The Black Panther Party's core practice was its armed citizens patrols to monitor the behavior of officers of the Oakland Police Department and challenge police brutality in Oakland, California.
Police are there not to, in our community, not to promote our welfare or for our security and our safety, but they're there to contain us, brutalize us, and murder us.
This frightened the government because this was the unity between the most oppressed of the people in the United States. We did what the government would not do, and they were absolutely afraid and said we were the most dangerous, the most threatening to the internal security of the United States. As the party grew, we were more and more stalked and surveilled by the FBI.
People.
We changed language. We changed social order. We talked about the power that we hold. Our slogan, all power to the people, changed the way people thought about themselves. We were motivated by love for the people.
Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is an organization, or really it's more like a movement that sparked from the passing of Trayvon Martin back in 2012. When the acquittal of George Zimmerman came back and he was not guilty, people started using the hashtag Black Lives Matter.
If it ain't gonna be no justice.
When 17-year-old Trayvon Martin died at the hands of George Zimmerman in 2012, protests sprung up around the country, demanding everything from changes to Florida's stand your ground laws to gun control.
When do our children get to just be children?
But one of the protests,
Black Lives Matter,
quickly took on a life of its own.
Black Lives Matter had many protests and many gatherings to combat the deaths of Michael Brown and Eric Garner. A new thing has been created by cops and people who don't support Black Lives Matter. They created the hashtag All Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter, which is just their way of saying that Black lives don't matter or that all lives matter the same. But as Black people, we're not saying that all lives don't matter. We're just saying that in this time, Black lives matter because some people don't realize the worth of Black people's lives.
Look how I'm living now. Police be tripping now. Yeah, this is America. Guns in my area. I got the strap. I gotta carry 'em. Yeah, I'ma go into this. Yeah, this is gorilla. Yeah, I'ma go get the bag. Yeah, or I'ma get the pad.
President Barack Obama. A great thing that happened in the African American community was the election of Barack Obama in 2008 and again in 2012.
I'm so in love with you. Whatever you want to do.
Barack Obama was elected to be the first African American president. During his presidency, he experienced tribulations, like people saying that he wasn't even American, people saying that he was siding with Osama bin Laden, and other racist things that they said about him just because he was a black man. But Barack Obama overcame this discrimination, and he was one of the greatest presidents the United States has ever experienced. Black people are thought to be
homeless, violent, lazy,
drug addicts,
rapists, alcoholics, unemployed,
criminals.
Martin had a dream.
Even though we are not in shackles and we are not picking cotton, we are not free.
To freedom! Martin had a dream. Kendrick have a dream. All my life